Hey everyone, it's Caffeine Injected. Such a weird name, but that's pretty much me. I drink a lot of soda and a lot of coffee. This video is going to be a little bit different. I wanted to talk about a concept that I've been thinking about for months and months, and you know, I've been wanting to make my own video game for a long time, years and years and years. And I'm a software developer. I've been in the industry for 20 plus years, and I've always, as a hobby in my spare time, always wanted to come up with a different MMO, something that really isn't anything at all like what we've been playing, in the past, God, 15 years? I started playing MMOs in Lineage 2, and been playing them ever since. I think that was 2000, I think. Maybe, I can't remember. I think maybe 2002, maybe 2002. But as I'm looking at, what makes an MMO fun, I think about it as like I'm writing a novel, right? If I'm going to make a video game, my first thought when I was going to make a video game is it's like I'm writing a book, right? And what are the key components of any fantasy book that you read? I mean, usually is, what's the story about? So the key components are really the story and, what drives the story. And you can see here I've kind of typed some of this stuff up. Um, the two things that really falls into is the character's background, and then the world itself. And you see, I state right here that to me the most important part of any MMO really is the world, and any book. When you first step into an MMO and you first start the game up and you first create your character, I mean, everybody there's all that anticipation and you're kind of excited about what's the world gonna be like. Once I create my character and it zones me in, and the first impressions you get usually is the physical, is what you see, what you actually see with your eyes, the way the grass looks, and then what you hear, it's, how does the wind sound? How do the characters' voices sound when they're talking to NPCs? What do the towns look like? I mean, that's super, super important stuff. It really gives you that first impression. So the world to me is always the most important piece. It really sets the tone and sets the mood. And when you think about the world, there's so many, I kind of talk about here the key components of fantasy world. I mean, you need, the world character, the people of the world, the main overriding events in the world. Now, these are all kind of things I think about as if I was writing a book, but I also think about the same things if it's going to go into an MMO. Here I say the story of the world, the story and the world set up two sides of the same coin. You can't have a good world without a good story and vice versa. We need to identify what are the regions of your world, where, what are the biomes, if you want to think about it that way. You've got your deserts and your plains and your mountains and all that. Obviously, you want to construct that stuff out in the beginning, but when you're constructing the story, and you think about the different races that live in your world, where are they going to live? Is this race going to be in the mountains? Are they going to be in the plains? You look at Lord of the Rings and you look at what were they called? The horse riders, Rohan. I mean, they were in these large plains of roaming, open areas of horses that were running around in these massive open plains. And so that really is one of the key pieces of that race, of those people, and that develops their culture around that. So obviously they were good horsemen because they were a lot of horses around to use as, for movement. That was their mode of transportation. Now, if you were to grow up in the mountains, what identifies you as a character race, how you, what type of things you do to live and survive, the type of food you eat, the type of tools you might make, and the type of weapons or your disposition and your outlook on the world will be drastically affected by those regions that you grew up in. And so I think when you're thinking of an MMO, you have to think about primarily in the beginning. You have to think about who the races are, where they're going to exist, and how they view their own people. What are their beliefs? And if I think I go down, excuse me, I think I go down and I talk about this. So think of this video as what makes an MMO fun / MMO kind of background story creation, or maybe the creation of the beginning parts of your world for your MMO. This is like part one of a series of videos I kind of want to go and get into. And it also helps me to force myself to hash out ideas for my game. But I also am really looking for feedback from people. I want people to come in and say, hey, you missed this, or I think this is fun, or I think this isn't fun, or I really want people jump on board and start giving me some opinions, because it'll really help me identify things that I might have not have thought of. But I'm telling you guys, I've thought about this stuff for years, so this is just scratching the very, very thinnest surface, the thinnest part of the surface that goes for miles. Let's just put it that way. But I was talking about the people, and let's see, where do I like here? You talk about the people of the world. What do they look like? What are their customs? What are their religious beliefs? Ethics, monetary systems, value goals. So when you think about the people of the world, you think about, well, how do they survive? What do they eat? And where do they get their food? What is their currency? Who do they trade with? What other people in the world do they trade with? What is their outlook with those people? Who do they like? Who do they dislike? And you think about games like World of Warcraft, you definitely had the Horde and the Alliance, and there was a lot of friction there, right, in the very beginning of the game, and so that's all part of story, world building, and that stuff has to be identified. So maybe this video maybe this shouldn't be called What Makes an MMO Fun. It should be really how to create, how to build an MMO, maybe, or what are the steps or the key pieces that need to be hashed out to create your MMO, correct? So it's not really what makes an MMO fun. Let's call this necessary steps in building your open world MMO. Okay? And I'll probably rename this again, but that right now, necessary steps in building. No, I don't even like that title. Let's just call MMO construction. Just for a very generic title. I definitely will end up changing that, but this is really talking about how to construct your MMO. So, and it's also about what makes it fun, because I really wanted to talk a little bit in this video, and I don't want to make this video too long, but talk about character progression and growth. I mean, when I think about you as a player playing an MMO, what's the most important thing to you? And the most important thing to you is your character, and how you feel about your character, and what that character means to you. And I mean, a lot of people want to get in there and role play to some degree, and some people don't. Some people just want to get in there and kick other people's ass in PvP. That's fine. But to me, character progression and the growth of the character is a way to identify yourself in the world and who you are, is a way to convey who you are to other people in the world. When I played Dungeons & Dragons back in the day, when I was in high school, way back when, in 1980, 85 to 89 or something, 84 to 88 maybe, you wanted to create your character and make him somewhat like you, but a lot different as well. I mean, he has some of your themes and some of the things that you care about, but you wanted to make him different too. So you thought about your alignment. Am I going to be evil, lawful evil, chaotic good, chaotic evil? What am I going to be? I played a rogue, or not a rogue, but a thief, who was a pretty funny guy, but he was also pretty devious. He'd stab you in the back if he wanted to. He wasn't always trustworthy, let's put it that way. And his name was Nimble. What was his name? I think Nimble Fingers or something stupid. Because I was in high school. I was a dumb kid. But the character progression in Dungeons & Dragons was you're trying to kill monsters and then go through different stories that the Dungeon Master set out for you. But if you survive, what did you get? You got money, and you were able to buy better gear. And if the Dungeon Master did it correctly, he wasn't just going to throw magic items at you, because that shouldn't be real. I mean, that isn't realistic. Magic, to me, in an MMO should be extremely rare, right? Like extremely, extremely, extremely rare. So any game that I would create, if I ever get this game out, maybe one day, and it is an exercise for me to learn how to create an MMO. So it's also an educational experience for me to to force myself to learn some of the systems and the software that I've always wanted to learn. And some of these and most of the software I've used. I've created stuff in Blender, and I've created stuff in Stratus Studio Pro and Photoshop and Illustrator, and and I've used the Unreal Level Editor a ton, and I've used the Unreal Engine just a little bit, and I've gone through some tutorial videos that I've got off Udemy on it. But so it's really a way to get myself to learn these tools. But in the end goal would be to get this game actually created. But the game that I would create would be more along the lines of Dungeons & Dragons, where when we played, you didn't go out and kill a bunch of orcs and trolls, and then magically you have the +5 Vorpal sword. No, that's not the way it was. My Dungeon Master might throw you a really nice sword that was hand-carved runes in it, but was it magical? No. Hell no. It might have had a 10% chance or a 5% chance to maybe be +1. So if you, when behind the scenes, he would roll, like, some nut dice, and you kind of knew what he was doing, right? Hold on. Oh my God, I really need to get YouTube Red. But behind the scenes, you kind of knew what he was doing. He was trying to roll up, because a lot of times he wouldn't do it ahead of time. Because I think he did that on purpose, because if he rolled like a 95, let's say it was 5% chance the weapon might match. If he rolled like a 96, he'd get a big grin on his face. When you were looting the monster after you finally killed him, and he'd get a big grin on his face, like, and then he would describe the weapon as it maybe had a slight shimmer, and the craftsmanship was unbelievable. It was so well crafted, and you've never seen a sword that looked quite like this. And then you knew maybe it's magical, right? And then you had to, like, a magic user cast to detect magic on it or something, right? I mean, so the fact that it was so rare is what made it so cool and so fun. You're like, wow, right? So to me, part of character progression growth is making your character feel like he earned something, and that if he does finally get to that point where he actually got that magical weapon, that he really feels powerful, and he really feels like something great has happened. And I think one of the things that's lost in MMOs is they just throw loot at you left, right, especially World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft is just, I don't like what they've done with the game at all. And I know it's to satisfy the masses, but my game is not out there to satisfy the masses. My game's out there because this is what I would want to play, right? This is how I would play an MMO. This is what I would want it to be. But getting back on topic, character progression is very, very important to me, and I think it's important to everybody. When I looked at stuff I typed out here, we wanted not only to assume the guise of our character, but experience his growth and journey throughout the fantasy world, to feel that his or her successes were our own. To me, this is one of the most important things in the game. And I think one of the first things you think of is gear progression. You start talking about as you're leveling up a character in World of Warcraft, for example, and there's so many MMOs. I just use World of Warcraft because it's the one that most people have played. You get better gear, and I think you want to show off your gear. So remember back in Vanilla, and people stood in Ironforge on the bridge, flexing their muscles because they had certain raid gear, and of course back then you couldn't transmog, so if you had that gear, just to look like that, you had to have it. So it was a way of showing off to people that you had done great deeds, to acquire those things. And when we think about, and I think that relates to the person, playing the character, that, hey, I've actually worked hard to get this and I'm proud of myself. And that's a key concept that can be lost, and it has been lost in a lot of MMOs because they throw gear at you so fast and so quick that, yeah, it's great for like 2 seconds or maybe a minute, and then in your next, what happens in World of Warcraft Legion or something, and you get like a 185 shoulder, you think, wow, that's great. Now and like 5 minutes later, you're thinking, where can I get the better shoulder? And I don't want people to think like that. I want you to think that I got something great, and I know that it was so difficult and so rare to get this. I'm not even thinking about where I'm going to get the next one. I'm thinking about my story. I'm thinking about me as a player and what I want to do. And I'm thinking about what is my continuing plot. Like when you step into the world of Vosslar, you have to identify who you want to be. And everything you do is towards that end goal. But, you're not just going to have gear and stuff thrown at you. That's not going to happen. You're going to have to spend, hours and weeks and months, and maybe you'll eventually find what you're looking for, but it's not going to be guaranteed. So is it a grindy game? Just you wait. But anyways, back to the character progression. But games throw stuff at you too quick. So yeah, they try to scale stuff so you can keep growing as a character, but it's so fast and so furious that, to me, the real value of what you're getting is really hasn't been achieved. But does it make it, so what are other ways that a character can grow? I think world renown is a big one. And they use it in WoW, and I keep using WoW as an example because WoW's implemented a lot of these types of things. I think and you talk about, Pantheon, Rise of the Fallen coming out with more difficult concepts, and they've built in an interesting system called perception. And really, perception is a direct correlation, a real throwback to Dungeons & Dragons, because it really is perception, right? If you go online and watch some of Matthew Mercer's Dungeons and Dragons videos, and I recommend that you do because he's a great dungeon master, and you see people checking perception rolls. So I mean, that's obvious. The guys who created Pantheon and one of the guys who's the lead guy, I think he was part of EverQuest. It's obvious they played Dungeons and Dragons, but the perception system in Pantheon allows for you to try to detect things that are maybe otherwise undetectable. And in Dungeons and Dragons, it's a roll, And I can't remember how to create the perception ability. I don't even remember using perception when I played, but I played way back in the first, second edition of rules, I think. Like I said, back in '85. But you could do a perception check, and maybe you were looking at a door going to a building, and the building was old and rough. But if you did a perception roll, you noticed that the door itself looked like it had been installed recently. That might trigger, a warning sign. You're thinking, well, this door may be trapped, or why is it newer than the rest of the building? So it's kind of trying to gauge danger where you can. Maybe you're trying to figure out how to break through an enemy's defenses, and you might roll perception and notice that there's a couple links missing out of his chainmail armor, and you try to strike that point. So those are different types of concepts for perception. I'm not quite sure how Pantheon's exactly going to use that, but that's another kind of system you can use to enable characters. I guess that would throw that under more like world immersion or character immersion. You're trying to give the character a more real world feeling. You're trying to give him more character, for lack of a better word. Give your character some character, but you're trying to give him the ability to play out in a more off-scripted way, And I think that's what made Dungeons & Dragons so great, is that you could do anything you wanted, whether or not it was the GM was going to, the Dungeon Master was going to let you get away with it. It was something else entirely. But I think trying to build more systems into MMOs that allow the character to go off an unscripted path and not have to follow the path that's forced down his throat. You go into like a game like Legion, World of Warcraft. Like I never bought Legion originally. I just bought it recently because I've been playing Vanilla WoW for a long time, and I bought Legion because I just wanted to. I bought Battle for Azeroth, and I think I had to buy Legion too, which kind of sucked, by the way. So I started going through Legion, and they really forced the whole story down your throat, and you gotta do this, and you gotta do that, and I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not a big fan of being forced into doing something. To me, you step into an open world, that's what it should be. It should be open. It should be open to your imagination, it should be open to your game style, it should be open to whatever you want to do. A great example of that, and it's not, it's no surprise that I'm playing, like, Skyrim music, because I love Skyrim music, but Skyrim was a good game in that you weren't always forced to have to follow any storyline. It was a key part of the game, of course. But you could just go off topic, and you could just go out and shoot bunny rabbits and chase them around through the trees, and work on your bow skill and shoot birds out of the air. I mean, I've done all that, and it's fun. It's very fun. So, to me, that's one of the things that's lost on MMOs these days. But getting back to the main point, and I always get off topic. If you ever watch my videos, I'll be all over the place. That's just the way my brain works. It's very I'm very scatterbrained. But the points I wanted to talk about in this video was really the story, the world, and the characters. I don't want to go too much further into this video because there's so much more. But I think setting up the story of your world, who are the people and how they exist, it really gives the background for where you want to go from there, because there's so much more. You have to develop these characters and their beliefs, and once you get to that point, then the person who comes into the game, you have to give them some of this story. You don't want to give them too much. You don't want to spill the beans too soon, so to speak. But anyways, I hope that this video was interesting to someone. I mean, this is just me kind of hashing out the important things, the important first steps of trying to construct a world that's going to set the background for your player's existence, and kind of some of the ideas that I believe in. So let's just call this MMO World Building Part 1, and that's probably what I'll call the video, I hope. And if you guys enjoyed this, I'm going to keep going on with this series and talking about all the individual pieces. I can't really talk too much specifically about my game, about my characters, because I don't want everybody to know everything about the game if it ever does come out. So I'm going to keep the races in my game, and I just opened that up too quick. You can probably pause the video and see it, but there's a lot of stuff I've developed on my Google Drive that are not in this. This is a document that needs to be updated. Anyways, I hope any of you guys enjoyed this. And please, if you have thoughts and comments on MMO world building or fantasy world building, or what is important to your characters when you play MMOs, and what do you find fun in MMOs, and what are you looking for that's maybe different? One thing I think the next part of the video that I'd like to do is some of my ideas that are going to be completely, not completely different. It's very difficult to come up with ideas that are different, that are totally different. But some of the ideas I'm coming up with would make my MMO quite a bit different, and a lot of people aren't going to like these ideas, and that's just the way it goes. This game is not targeted for everybody. It's targeted for a very small set of people that want to play something that's really more realistic and more difficult, and it really focuses on you as a player doing what you want to do and trying to construct an outline that you can follow through the world and enjoy, because it's how you want to approach an MMO. It's not how the other guy approaches it. You're not going to go online and say, what's the latest build, or what's the latest, what do they call it in those stupid, MOBAs? I can't think of the word. Tier lists and all that. It's not like that. There's not going to be any build, right? And we'll talk about skills, and we'll talk about some of the systems in the game that I'm thinking about. I won't go into too specific detail. Again, I don't want to tell everybody everything right now. It's too early in development. But I think we'll talk about some of the things that I think will make it a lot more interesting, because players won't be like other players. No player in the game is going to be exactly like another player. I mean, they'll be similar, of course, but you're not going to be like, well, I'm a rep paladin with these talent points here, here, and here. You know what I mean? Because there are no talent points. And we'll go into the skills later. So, and I think that kind of sets it up so you guys can maybe know what I'm going to talk about in the next video. All right, guys, I'm going to stop it here. I'll talk to you later.